Remember those dreams of parenting bliss? I mean, you pictured it would be like that Pharrell song, Happy. And then reality hit, and now you're humming the song, I Hate Mondays. But hey, they do go back to school on Mondays, so it's not all bad. Hi, I'm Jodie Sweetin, and this is Awkward Conversations, where each week we aim to give parents practical advice on raising happy, healthy, substance-free kids who are empowered to make smart choices. Today we're diving into the magic of positivity. We'll explore how to build a positive mindset in our kids, and let's be honest, ourselves too. We're talking practical strategies for fostering resilience and happiness in our families. So get ready to transform those grumpy mornings into moments of joy and strength, all the while equipping our kids to face challenges without turning to substances. So let's turn those frowns upside down and make positivity our family's superpower. And I would love to say hello to Amy McCarthy, who is our senior clinical social worker at Boston Children's Hospital. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining us today.
Thank you. Let's get positive.
Let's do it.
We're thrilled to have joining us the amazing Niyc Pidgeon, founder of Unstoppable Success and creator of the Positive Psychology Coach Academy. She's an acclaimed speaker, award-winning positive psychologist, and best-selling author. With over a decade of experience, Niyc has mentored tens of thousands, aiming to help 1 billion people become more mentally healthy. Hey, Niyc, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So glad you're here. We are talking so much about how to build resiliency in our kids, in ourselves even. And, you know, positivity is one of those things. And having that sort of positive mindset that gives you the belief that you can overcome challenges. I would love to hear a little bit about your background and kind of your personal journey into, you know, becoming a practitioner of positivity.
Well, I wasn't originally set to be a psychologist. I was actually supposed to be a mechanical and automotive engineer. And when I was 17 or 18, I had a huge career change based on a single conversation that I had. Now, my boyfriend at the time was seeing a sports psychologist because he was a professional sportsman. And he came back from this session and he said, Niyc, I've had this amazing experience. I was put into a visualization where the psychologist told me to close my eyes and imagine that I was on the cricket field and I had the bat in my hand. And he said to me, don't look at the fielders, look for the gaps in between them instead. Now that hit me like a ton of bricks because it made me think, how much of our time do we spend invested on focusing on problems and what's going wrong instead of what's going right? So I decided to cancel my engineering degrees, go and study psychology. And then I found positive psychology, which is actually the science of what people do well and how we get to flourish and thrive.
And what I love so much about your story, especially as we think about adolescents and young adults, is sometimes I feel like there's this pressure of like knowing what you want to do and what you want to be. And, you know, I'm just inspired by your story and thinking of like, it's never too late to pick a new path. And, you know, that's what adolescence and young adult is about, is finding what's the right path for you.
What a positive way to look at things.
Check me out.
It's true. I have 16 and, you know, 13-year-old daughters that I mention a lot. And that idea of, you know, telling them that, you know, you might change things. There's no, you know, strict thing that says that you have to know what you're going to do by the time you're 17 or 18. That might change. It could change several times over your lifetime, and that's okay. You know, again, sort of reframing things in a positive mindset that, you know, abundance rather than lack, you know, all of those sorts of things.
Double the skill sets.
Exactly. Now, what are some of the core principles of positive psychology?
Yeah, so it was invented as a counterbalance to psychology as usual. And we look at what it is that supports human flourishing. So we look at communities, individuals, and also businesses. And we look at between 5 and 9 things that we need to thrive. So one of the main theories is something called PERMA, which is positive emotions, engagement, meaning and purpose, positive relationships, and accomplishment. So that sense of having made progress in our lives and in our days. So when we can hit on all of those things, that's what it takes for us to flourish and to thrive. So that's one of the fundamental theories of positive psychology. Then there's also things like growth mindset, which originated in the study of children. So we looked at what happens when kids are told that they're talented or they're gifted, and the impact that that has on their work ethic and also their self-esteem. So what the research found was that when we are taught, and when it's adults as well, when we're taught to focus not just on the outcome, but we actually focus on the process and the journey along the way, we're able to enjoy it so much more and experience greater sense of well-being as well.
It's such an important thing because so often, I mean, so much of our modern world is, predicated on the idea of it's the next thing that's going to make you happy, whether it's the next job, the next vacation, the next relationship, the next thing that you buy. And, really, I always am trying to emphasize that, you're not going to be any more satisfied once you get there than you are right now. And actually the getting there is kind of the interesting part, right? Because once you're there, then, okay, well, now what? But it's the getting there that's interesting. How the new ways, the different ways of thinking, the different ways of creating. And it just sort of ties into so many of the episodes that we've talked about, whether it's, creative expression or, families, resiliency, all of those sorts of things. Now, I know when we talk about, the idea of growth mindsets and positive psychology, the pop psychology terms that we know sort of so much today that have proliferated on social media, toxic positivity is one of the things that we kind of hear about now. And it's the idea of, just blanketing everything over with. If you just think good enough, you can think your way out of it. And I want to really explain to parents that that's not what we're talking about here. And what are some of the common misconceptions of the ideas of positive psychology?
Yeah, so a lot of what I hear is it's not possible to be happy all of the time, and you can't just positive think your way out of any situation. And actually that's right, but that's not what positive psychology is. So positive psychology is the evidence-based scientific study of what actually works, the tools, the really simple activities or exercises, things that you can do in your day that maybe take a few minutes, and how they're proven to shift the way that we feel. Now, where toxic positivity comes in, that's the idea that negative emotions are bad and we shouldn't feel them. And that's just not true. We need to allow and honor and value the whole spectrum of human experience and emotion. And it's actually more negative to repress them than it is to feel them and express them. So instead, what positive psychology teaches is to tune into what those feelings are and look for the gold within them. So instead of just ignoring them, look at what is it that has maybe happened or what's come up that has caused an impact in this way, and allowing the emotion, and then also looking at how can we find a lesson or a blessing or a reframe in it instead. So understanding that whether it feels good or bad or hard or easy at the time, in some way it's all serving our growth.
Growth mindset is also about recognizing the mistakes that you might make, or learning really from the mistakes that you might make. And so feeling the pain of what it is to make a mistake or to have to learn something in a different way is valid, should be expressed, should be felt. But then there's also something that you can now learn from, like having had that experience in your life.
So it's that saying, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And I think if you learn, you win anyway.
Yeah.
So it's looking at how are you growing through that experience. Did it allow you to develop a skill? Or did it allow you to build a relationship or a connection more deeply with someone?
Right.
And I think it's when you actually get curious and you shift your perspective and you choose to look, then you can really start to see the gold within those challenges.
Absolutely.
I love that.
There was a book I read several years ago, and it just had such an impact on me. It was called The Untethered Soul. And it talked a lot about that, the idea of feelings is moving through them and not getting stuck in them, and that you used a word that really reminded me of that, which is to allow. And to allow our feelings to happen, but to realize that we move through them, we're not just mired in them. And that constant idea of that things change, and that some feelings are good, some are bad, and then you'll come back around again, and it'll constantly keep going. I remember reading that book and I went, oh, it's not about avoiding painful situations or painful feelings. It's about allowing them to happen and then going, oh, but I know something else will happen too. And I think that so often, kids especially, they get trapped in the idea of this is bad, it's always going to be bad, that never always sort of thinking that you're very black and white. And part of teaching adolescents and young people to grow up is teaching them about that gray area, and that sometimes things don't feel great, but it doesn't mean your journey's over, Now, I know, Nick, that you often work with adults in your business, helping with leadership opportunities, leadership skills. How can we take those things and apply them to parenting?
I think the first thing is to understand that we get to look after our own circle first. So it's looking after ourselves and resourcing ourselves so that when we're going out to help friends or family or children, we actually are resourced and we're pouring from a fuller cup. I think it's actually super challenging to give all of your energy away. And if you don't actually have the tools, or if you haven't embodied the tools, then how can you actually teach something when you're not practicing it on and for yourself first? So I think there's a huge opportunity in us actually role modeling the way for the younger generations, as well as practically implementing the tools. So taking the tools back into the home so that you can use them in practices in daily life, maybe sharing a gratitude practice around the dinner table. And that's one of my favorite things when my students come back and they share what it is that's actually working for them and their family and their kids in the home.
Now, I know a lot of parents are obviously, swamped with work and maybe multiple kids and all sorts of things going on in their lives. And the idea of making sure that they are, resourced first, or that they have everything they need before taking care of others. Sometimes that can be a really difficult and challenging concept for parents. Are there any ways that you have been able to talk to people and say, look, you might not feel like your battery is recharged at 100% or like you have 100% to give, but if you're at 60, you can give somebody 10. What are some of the ways that you've found where you've been able to say, I understand you might not be able to give everything, but here's what you can do? Because I think people can get really overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really understanding that it's the small daily activities that add up and they compound to create big results over time. So rather than trying, I always say if you're building that consistency muscle, it's better to do something for 10 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day that feels good for you. Practice a tool or do a meditation for 5 minutes, go out for a walk for 10 minutes. Rather than trying to do a 2-hour practice that just isn't practical every single day. So it's better to do something small and often than do it once and then give up. So rather than trying to beat yourself up or make yourself wrong for not doing everything that someone who doesn't have children could do, it's about looking at if you do something, it's better than doing nothing. And actually those small choices, the positive choices, can build your confidence, and that transfers into other areas of your life.
I mean, that's an idea that we talk about with young people, is that idea of small actionable steps. It doesn't have to be everything all at once, but it's, just those little things, those esteemable acts that make you feel like you have good self-esteem. It's, all of those little small positive rituals and practices that we can do, like you said, during dinner or in the car ride. I remember my mom used to ask me the roses and thorns of your day. What were the good parts and what were the not so great parts? And, your kid might not always be able to answer. You might not always be able to answer that question. But I found that it really, when I would ask it to my kids or when my mom would ask it to me, it was like, oh, you don't just care about hearing the best parts, but you want to hear about the things that I'm maybe struggling with too, or that were hard or that frustrated me. And do you have maybe your top 3 practical strategies or things that you would encourage people to do that are maybe less than 10 minutes that they can start incorporating to figure out ways to have a more positive mindset for themselves and their families?
And what I'm hearing from what you're sharing is it's actually the act of opening up positive communication that is the opportunity for us to create an impact. Because even if the person doesn't know what their rose or their thorn is, the fact that they're starting to think differently and now they're comfortable communicating means that if they do have a hard day, they're more likely to open up about it and feel like they're safe and heard and held by that parent. So I think really fostering that and giving space to conversations in the home in the first place is very important. And that might look like having a ritual practice that once a week you sit down as a family and you do your highlights, your 3 gratitudes from the week. It might look like practicing something called active constructive responding, which is being present with each other. And instead of when someone tells you a celebration or tells you some good news, saying, oh, well, that's great, what's for dinner? Instead saying, congratulations, I want to know more about that. Tell me what feels the most exciting for you. So actually opening up more conversation and then getting into optimistic, hopeful, expansive conversations with each other. So talking about goals and vision and what it is that you want to create rather than what's going wrong. So it's really about orienting the communication that we're having with each other towards what's good and what's possible.
You're watching Awkward Conversations Season 4. Welcome back to Awkward Conversations Season 4. If you sort of fall off of your routine and if, maybe as a parent you haven't been on top of, either monitoring your kids' social media or their homework or whatever, or maybe you've been a little negative lately because you're stressed, that doesn't mean that you can't immediately change it in the moment. And you can't start practicing some of those things. Maybe, your kid told you some exciting news and you were like, oh, great, yeah, can you please take the trash out? And I am so guilty of that. Sometimes I do it with my kids where I'm like, but I need you to do the thing that I've been asking you to do. And, when I am in a place where I can take the time and go, wait, let me pay attention to this first. The minutia, the checking off the list of the chores and the priorities. Sometimes I know as a parent, I get really caught up in because it's the things that I need to make sure that gets everybody through the day, right? But I think for parents, if we can always remember that, if we feel ourselves slipping into that negativity or that, constant badgering or reminding, that we can switch that and go, you know what? I'm being really negative. Let me hear all the good things. I'm going to stop talking and just listen. And my kids sometimes are just so grateful when I go, I'm going to stop talking now and just listen. And they're like, thanks. Finally. And that's such a huge piece of it, is really listening and engaging with our kids and teaching them that there's hope.
Yeah. And starting over and modeling again that, like, maybe mom didn't have a great day, but I can pick this back up and I can, reintegrate these practices into our lives, into my life.
Right.
It's never too late.
Yeah. And I've also, I think it's also really important, obviously in age appropriate ways, but to talk about maybe some of the things that you didn't do the way you wanted to do the first time, or things that, when you were a teenager, I really wished I would have done this differently, and have those conversations with your kids, because I know sometimes young people feel like the adults in their lives are weirdly untouchable or have never done anything wrong because they only hear about, well, you should have done this better. And sometimes it's nice to hear your parent go, oh, I really screwed this up. Let me tell you about the time I failed math, because it brings that humanity, and it's the reminder of hope. It's the reminder of, oh, I might have, failed a couple classes, or I might have gone through a couple of divorces, or gone through, substance use issues, or whatever it might be. But that to admit to some of those things to your kids and go, yeah, sometimes it's not easy, but I picked myself up and I kept going. Or to be able to laugh at yourself. I laugh at myself all the time, and I see that my kids now have this great ability to laugh at themselves. They do something silly, they do something stupid. We'll laugh about it a week later. And it takes the pressure off of having to feel like they're perfect.
it's so important to practice forgiveness. And we often think of forgiveness as forgiving somebody else, but actually forgiveness is a practice for us to let go of the way that we are harming ourselves through maybe putting too much pressure on ourselves, or maybe trying to do all of the things all of the time and judging ourselves too harshly. So it's remembering that everyone's human, everyone messes up, nobody's perfect, and really going easy on yourself through that. So there's a really beautiful practice and a tool from positive psychology, which is the forgiveness letter. So it asks you to write a letter to forgive somebody. And often someone will start this letter and they're writing it to someone else. And halfway through, it'll actually flip and you'll be writing the letter to yourself, to forgive yourself for the toxic feelings and thoughts that ultimately are only harming you. And I think if we could practice that more often and more deeply and connect with that, then we can show up with more compassion for ourselves and others.
Absolutely. And those ideas of compassion and empathy are core to what positive psychology is all about, because you have to have, a compassion and empathy for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, and to, meet somebody really where they're at. And sometimes young people growing up, adolescents, it can be difficult to meet them where they're at, but to really allow them to understand that trial and error are part of, that's the point. The whole point of this is to try new things, and sometimes you'll succeed at them and keep going, and sometimes you won't. And that's it. That's the point of this life, is to just try new stuff out and keep going. But the most important part of that, obviously, is the keep going part. Now, I know that there are probably some, final bits and pieces of advice that you would like to give to parents for raising particularly substance-free kids, because, so much of what we're talking about is how to combat substance use and misuse amongst young people. How can parents take one great piece of advice from what you do with positive psychology and apply it to their kids?
I think there's two fundamental things that spring to mind in this. And the first thing is the broadening and building effect of positive emotions. Now, you mentioned humor before, and being able to laugh your way through things. What happens when we experience positive emotions like fun and enthusiasm and gratitude and love is we open up our minds so that it becomes easier to find solutions, and we also build our psychological resources. So it's a really easy, proven way to not just feel better because it's an end in itself, but also build that toolkit so when times do get tough, you're able to pull onto those psychological resources that you've developed. The other thing that springs to mind is actually working to your strengths. And this is a test or an assessment that you could do for yourself as a parent. And you could also have your kids do it as well. So the theory teaches that everybody is good at something. And when you discover what those things are that you're strong at, and you apply them in your day-to-day, you become stronger and more successful because of that. So if you've got a child who's suffering and they're in a pattern that's a downward spiral, if they're able to actually find out that they are good at many things and there is hope, and now they've got a positive future vision, it's much more likely that they can then shift into the upward spiral instead.
Yeah, I love, the idea of, inherent kind of self-worth, especially for young people. And the idea that, the things that we need are things that we have inside of us, but we just maybe haven't tapped kind of quite into those things quite yet, but they're there. And to go back, to what we've been talking about before, there is so much evidence and science behind this idea. You've spoke about, evidence and some of the science. We know that NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, we know that SAMHSA, which we've talked about a couple of times on our episodes, they've done research into resilience and positive psychology and how they are huge things to combat mental health in young people and adults, but also substance misuse. And so again, this isn't fluff we're talking about. We know that these strategies work for people.
Yeah, and they're proven in science. So whilst it might be something that is classed as woo-woo, or it might be something that your grandmother taught you, just because it's simple, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. So what positive psychology does is it does the research to show how it works. So now if you've got someone that's skeptical, or you've got a kid or a parent that's saying, like, that's a load of rubbish, as we would say in Great Britain, then you can actually prove that this does work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, what you also said around, it's almost like if you remove the roadblocks, like if I'm thinking like I'm no good at this, I can't accomplish this, then then I'm not going to be super motivated to try. Right. Versus if I come at something from a vantage point of like I'm capable, I've done hard things before. It opens up the lines of motivation and energy that we're willing to put towards a goal.
I would say this is also particularly important for kids who are neurodivergent or who maybe have ADD or ADHD. I know for myself and my kids, all three of us have it, but I did not get diagnosed until much later in life. And I used to just think I was terrible at remembering birthdays or important events or things, and I would beat myself up over it. And it wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I went, oh no, my brain's just busy doing all this other stuff, and it's really good at that. But I'm not a great, calendar person, so I have an app on my phone. But learning to not internalize those faults or things that I felt were lacking, and to instead turn that into, oh, but you know what my brain's really good at is, multitasking, or and also now that I have had those things introduced to me, I'm able to give those things to my daughters and go, you know what, math, maybe not your strong suit, but you know what you're really good at? You are so good at being there for your friends and like picking up on emotions and really getting, and they're like, yeah, I am. And that, finding those strengths is, again, it's just such a reward for adults, for young people. You're not going to be great at everything. You're not even going to be good at everything, but there's a couple things that you're probably pretty decent at.
Right. And maybe also, what do you want to be good at?
Yeah.
And how can we grow that? Like we talked about in other episodes, what you focus on grows.
Right.
And, let's talk about, what is it that you want? And let's try to help you get there.
I think coming back to making those big decisions when you're at such an early age, we're encouraged in the school system to be good at everything and to get good grades in every single subject. And when you go into the big wide world, you realize that you're not good at everything, and that's okay. So I think it's normalizing working to your strengths and everybody being able to work together, almost like we're a team out in the world where we match each other's strengths and weaknesses, so that we can all get things done, but everybody gets to work in ways that feel uplifting and joyful for them.
Absolutely. Empowering ideas, positive ideas, work for parents, families, young people. I mean, we can't say enough good things about just being kind to yourself and being kind to others. Like, it's kind of important. Just be a good human. Now, obviously, every day can't be sunshine and roses. And I know that there are probably a lot of parents out there that are watching, these episodes, particularly this one, and saying, I can't be positive about anything that happened today or this week, or they've been through a period of a lot of loss, in a period of time. Can you set up a little bit, like, what are some things that parents who are like, I have no positive emotion left in me today or in this moment? What advice do you have for them? What things can you tell them to let them know, like, it might not be now, but it'll be eventually?
So a few things spring to mind. So first of all, practicing self-care and looking at the 4 core areas of health. So looking at sleep, nutrition, movement, and restoration. So if you're not getting a good night's sleep, then it's natural that everything is going to feel harder during the day. So I would go there first, and I'd look at what are those foundational elements and aspects that are almost setting you up for success. Now, restoration is stress management. So it's, are there any pockets within your day when you can take a small rest or go out for a walk or do the meditation, which may or may not be realistic, but the more that we can practice that and the more that we can get used to doing it in short bursts, the more we can restore and recharge that energy level and that capacity. The other thing that I love, and I love it because it's so simple and it's really, really powerful, is remembering to come back to gratitude. So remembering to come back to, even though it's hard, I'm grateful for X, Y, and Z. And practicing being in that frequency and knowing that tough times don't last, but tough people do. And knowing that these tough times are temporary. And in the meantime, we can give ourselves grace, practice that forgiveness, and be grateful for what's good.
One of my favorite quotes in the whole world, although maybe if you're having a hard day, you might be like, please stop saying that. But like one of my favorite quotes is like, not every day is good, but there's good in every day. And I think sometimes coming to stop to, figure out, even if it's the smallest thing, like I'm breathing, like I have water to drink, like sometimes coming down to those fundamentals can kind of help bring us out of some of those funks sometimes that we're in. And again, like I heard you say, Nick, before, it's not necessarily about not feeling the feelings. Like, in fact, we don't want to repress the feelings. We can have a hard day. We should honor the fact it was a hard day. And then also be able to, engage, I think, in some of these really wonderful tips you've just given around gratitude and coming back to center ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. And just almost building yourself a little protocol or practice that works for you. So it might be as simple as thank, connect, and move. So get into gratitude, connect through a meditation or something that is mindfulness based. And then move your body. So shift your energy, go out and do a walk. And that really simple thank, connect, and move can transform your entire day.
No one is, I think, asking parents to try and do everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah.
That no one is looking for that. So, take those little moments where you can. And we really encourage parents out there to be kind to themselves. Because, again, that modeling behavior of being kind to yourself, your kids pick up on it. They hear everything that you say out loud to yourselves, and they watch everything that you do and how you regard yourself. And even the things that you might not think are coming across, they definitely are. So I love that. Think, connect, and just give yourself a moment to remember that it's going to be okay. It might not be okay right now, but it will be again at some point.
Tough times don't last. Tough people do.
I like that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I mean, this has been such a great conversation. I learned so much, and I think our listeners also really have gotten some great tips on how to connect with themselves, with their families, with their people that they love, to really make sure that idea of positive support and positive self-talk and self-worth is really something that we're using to combat substance use across the board.
Nick, you've talked a lot about gratitude exercises, and I'm wondering if you could talk us through a quick one that families might be able to kind of replicate in their homes with their children.
Absolutely. So really simply, recounting 3 good things is proven to shift your well-being. So you could do this when you're waiting in line at the store. You could do it if you're sat in the doctor's surgery in the waiting room. You could do it at the dinner table. So it's a powerful, positive connection ritual, which will bring deeper bonds within your family. But also the practice of gratitude itself is proven to help you feel better when you already feel good. But it's also proven in clinical populations and for times that feel really hard or when you're really suffering as well. So just getting present, because there's always something to be grateful for when you look for it. And if you want to take it a step further, you could actually write out a gratitude letter. So you could write a letter to somebody that you haven't ever properly thanked. And that is known to boost your well-being for up to a month.
Yeah. I love that. And one thing I always try to do is thank people in the immediate. Give people their flowers when they deserve them, because it makes people feel so good, and it makes you feel so wonderful to be able to tell somebody, like, you're doing a really great job at whatever it is that they're doing, even if it's just being a good human for the day. Like, you're being an awesome human. Amy, you're being an awesome human today. I appreciate you.
The power to change their whole day, right? Like,
truly. Now, I would love for you to give us just some last final thoughts that you would want to leave parents with who are maybe watching today and are like, I don't know how I'm going to remain positive, or, maybe my kid or my family is going through something, but I really want to figure out how to have hope.
I think it's remembering that it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do have to start. And it's knowing that just by making the effort and being intentional, coming from a good place of pure intention, then that's your best is always good enough. And if that's all that you can give, or maybe you don't know the full answer, as long as you're showing up and you're starting a conversation, or you're asking the question, or you're holding space and being present, then that's good enough.
I love it. And we've talked about that on previous episodes, the idea of the quote unquote good enough parent, that it doesn't require perfection. It just requires you trying. And I know we had a great episode, I believe last season, about that. Niyc, are there any resources or, places that we can find more information about you or the ideas of positive psychology that you could give us a little bit about?
Absolutely. So my website, niyc.com. And then also my books, Now Is Your Chance and One More Day as well, which are both positive psychology focused.
And we will make sure we have those in the show notes for our viewers to check out for sure.
Absolutely. Niyc, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you joined us from the UK and it is very late for you. So we will let you go get some quality sleep so that we aren't setting you up for a terrible day tomorrow.
Don't worry, I love it. I'm so grateful. Such an amazing conversation. Thank you, guys. It's been my joy to be here.
Thank you so much. And I really do hope that some of the parents out there and caregivers have connected with this and will remember to just take a deep breath, give yourself a little grace, give yourself a little patience. You don't have to be perfect. It's all going to be okay. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Awkward Conversations. Make sure and check out our other episodes where we talk about all different kinds of subjects. And remember, you're doing just fine. Well, that's all for now. Tune in next week for more of Awkward Conversations Season 4. Use the force, Luke. With great power comes great responsibility. Just keep swimming. These iconic lines from some of our favorite movies do more than just entertain. They teach valuable life lessons and help navigate challenges by distilling complex concepts into something easily understandable.
I think it's really important to do art together, to have it just be a way to pass time, and not have it have a lot of learning objectives necessarily. But I think the more that kids get into art and making things, they want to know how to make it better. And that's the best motivator.
Any form of artistic expression leads to an overall increase of measurable brain development and a decrease in suffering for kids.
And certainly exposure to arts, being able to go to museums, galleries, plays, dances, everything, and then just asking them about their response to it, I think is much more powerful than trying to teach them too much. When they ask, that's a good teachable moment. But I like to ask them, like, what do you think of that? What was their favorite part? What was weird to you? Why do you think it was weird? And those are the questions I think that get kids, again, really thinking.
Make sure to check out getsmartaboutdrugs.com. Parents, caregivers, you can find so many resources of great information there about how to talk to your kids and make these conversations a little less awkward. A huge thank you to the Elks DAP, which is the largest all-volunteer nationwide drug awareness program, and also a huge thanks to the DEA for their outreach program and for making this possible.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Awkward Conversation series are solely those of the individuals, speakers, commentators, experts, and/or hosts involved, and do not necessarily reflect nor represent those of the production, associates, or broadcaster, or any of its employees. Production is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the series available for viewing. The primary purpose of this series is to educate and inform. This series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This series is available for private, non-commercial use only. The production, broadcaster, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.